Friday afternoon, folks, here in downtown Honolulu at the ThinkTech Hawaii studios. Ted Ralston, your host here on Where the Road Leads. Our totally unrehearsed and unscripted show, although we've had some violent discussions in the last 10 minutes with our guests getting ready here. We're talking about visualizing what that road ahead might be after we had the conversation last week with Jay Fidel trying to set up the year ahead of us. But before we can visualize that road, we really have to visualize the end state that we want it to get to, and then we can maybe put the pieces together. And we got three exceptional guests here, as we always have on the show, that can help see what that vision is, see how the road can be fabricated and constructed and illustrated and expressed, and further how some of the things you might not think about that in the world of cyber come into play. So first of all, we have General Darryll Wong back again, a visionary leader in public service for his entire career, and embarking in new directions, but we are anticipating having continuous and accelerated interactions with Darryll and even broader visions than we've enjoyed in the past. In fact, if we had in this state a division or a department of the vision, Darryll would be the guy to have running that department of the vision, my view. Personal idea here. Anyway, we have Craig Clouet. Craig is from Esri, which means something here in town, and also with the HIGICC, which stands for the Hawaii Gastrointestinal Country Club.
Yes, I think it's the Hawaii Geographic Information Coordinating Council.
Sorry, okay, the Hawaii Geographic Information Coordinating Council.
Yes.
Okay, and you guys are having an open house, a workshop type thing on the 23rd. It's more of a workshop.
Workshop, yeah, sorry, not open house.
In Ala Park.
Yeah, McCoy Pavilion.
And it's all going to be about geography and how and the use of UAVs and.
It's going to be focused on UAVs, but most importantly on what kind of data they produce. So not just the flying of them, but actually what kind of product or map you're going to be able to get.
So we'll get back into that aspect of the expressive and the illustrative layer in a moment. Okay. But that's great because we need to illustrate these things. We need to take what's happening and find a way to depict it at different layers, like a CAT scan, so we can do a CAT scan on Hawaii and figure out what's going on.
Right.
And then we have Burt Lum, who has many credentials in his pocket, one of which is Bytemarks. He's the proprietor of Bytemarks Cafe, and is a social media professor at Winter
Not quite professor.
We'll call it that for the sake of this show at Winter Community College. And I really want to take his course because I'm too old to understand what social media are all about. I wasn't born and raised with that, and I really feel desperately out of touch with social media. And it does so much. It's such a factor, such a part of our emerging life, whether we like it or not. So I really better understand it. But I do want to ask you, as we get into this, how you keep up with the rapid change in social media and provide educational content that is continually updated or ahead of the wave. In any case, so we have vision, we have expression of that vision, and we have these non-artifact aspects coming in through the world of cyber, and one of the big parts is social media. This all has to come together in some way that our leaders can take a look at it, and people can understand where their influence is. We can bring it into the schools and even turn it into curriculum to work on. But Darryll, you've been such a visionary leader for as long as I've known you. How do you see these aspects of coming up with our visions in areas that are beyond just the things we see in our eyes every day? Things like that are trends that are happening, things that are based on factors elsewhere. And in your business, of course, you saw a lot of that. So as we go forward.
So at the end of the day, it's everything drives to what do you need the information for? And you got so much information. I mean, you have social media, and then you have GIS or common operating picture type things. But at the end of the day, what does each person need to make that data? And there's just trillions of bits of data. How do you make that data mean something? It could be something in social media. It could be something visual. I'm married to an artist, so I have to express things to her in an artistic way versus, a pilot that does it more in a systematic way. So, the world now has to include all of that because you got to get the message, or you have to have the leadership make the right decisions but you have to show them in different ways. So social media is showing what is out there in the information world. And then there's data on the exact things that are happening or going on at one time. And then Esri in its common operating picture, then how do you cobble it all together for any one leader to make the decision, but different leaders are going to read that information differently.
So depending how those leaders are structurally connected in their DNA, they're going to have different ways that they see things and put the picture together and then take actions. So we got to be prepared for different ways to express this and figure out what works best with different organizations within the government.
So if you look at it, and it was explained to me another way, how do you find a needle in a haystack? Because when we look at the haystack, everyone looks at the haystack differently. Well, you remove the haystack by doing the things that we're doing with social media, with a common operating picture. Everyone, the haystack's removed, and then hopefully the leaders that have to make the decisions in whatever levels they have to make it at can see the needle very easily.
And in the past, we understood what the needle might have looked like. It was probably a physical aspect of some kind or an action someone takes. But now, in the world of cyber, that needle may not look like anything we've ever imagined before. It may not be anywhere from our shores. It could be from far away. It could be what was happening to your own cell phone just today, or what happened to my computer last night. And so let's turn for a moment to Burt and ask you how you think about these emerging cyber-related, cyber-conducted activities and how we capture them, how we prepare to feed them to Craig to illustrate them.
Well, so I think I'll draw on an example that we actually do perform for the civil defense. There's a volunteer group called the VOS, which is the Virtual Operations Support Team. And what we basically do is when there is a natural disaster occurring, and in a couple of them that we were actively involved in was Flossie and Isao. So both were hurricanes that were coming in from the west. And what we would do is wait till Civil Defense gives us a call and says, Burt, we need to activate the VOS. And so what the VOS does is that we assemble all of the volunteers, and they could be across the world. So when we did Flossie, we had somebody in Europe, we had somebody on the West Coast, we had in the Midwest, California, as well as all the islands on Oahu. And our role was really to monitor social media and monitor whatever channels that we were comfortable with managing. So it could be Twitter, it could be Facebook, could be Instagram, could be blogs, could be whatever we wanted to search with, and we could use whatever search tools we were comfortable with. We could use Hootsuite, we could use TweetDeck, we could use whatever we wanted to use. And we as individuals would monitor. And we would base our monitoring on 3 criteria. And the first criteria is, do we see misinformation being put out there? And can we capture that and sort of put it into a shared document that others could look at and sort of get a sense as to what we have identified as misinformation?
And how do you identify misinformation?
Well, so you could maybe there's a photo, right? And it's a photo of some destruction that's occurring off of an island. What we would try to do is, determine, is this real? Is there some, is it, and during Flossie, there were some sort of spoof photographs. They were easily identifiable. So we could sort of pull them and then,
but it takes human interest or human attention to the issue and say, hey.
Right, and then another one was, there was some tweets that were going out saying that the city was going to pick up all the homeless and bring them into shelters. Now, as soon as you look at that, you think, well, logistically, that's pretty challenging, right, for the city to all of a sudden pick up all the homeless. So we flagged that as a possible misinformation. And what we tried to do is call up the authorities, and be it, like the Department of Emergency Management or somebody from the city, and determine, is this in fact true? And if so, can you help clarify this? And what it turned out was that it was only in Waianae that they were doing it. So we helped to try to bring some clarity to what would seem to be misinformation. So misinformation, we look for helping to retweet or repost official information that's coming out from the official agencies. And that agency could be Civil Defense, it could be Department of Emergency Management, could be counties, it could be Red Cross. So, people and organizations that are already official. And then the third thing that we try to look for is, are there people in distress, or are there situations that are possible dangerous situations, like, you know, maybe power outages or tree across the road, or, you know, certain things that people could take action on. And what we do is we put them all into a shared document, and then that shared document is viewable by the first responders. And that way they are the ones responsible for taking action on it. So if there, you know, over the course of Flossie or ISAL, as we collect, you know, the information, and this information, for the most part, has enough information to geolocate where they are. And then we could, you know, we could then put it on maps, and then, you know, have some sort of situational awareness based on the distribution of some of these requests.
That's fascinating, totally fascinating, and I'm totally intrigued by what you're doing. That's really interesting. I just have so many questions about it. Like, is it structured the same from time to time, or do you change players as the circumstances change, or as volunteers are available? I'd like to ask Craig, after we take a bit of a break here, how we would take that flexible, perhaps unstructured, formatted data and feed it into a highly structured system like Esri. How do we depict that on something that shows trends and shows command personnel what might be coming? Let's take a break. We'll be back in about 30 seconds and see if we can contain ourselves during the break here to keep this on track. Thanks very much.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Ted Ralston, everyone, here in the ThinkTech studios downtown Honolulu, Friday afternoon. You're with us on Where the Road Leads, and our discussion today is all about visionizing that road so we can figure out how to draft the road. And we think of it from the terms of the end state vision of what's necessary to accomplish. We have all kinds of information coming in, tactical information, social information, changing information. Let's turn to Craig a little bit here and ask you to react as a geographer, a practicing geographer. In fact, the coordinator of the HIGICC, president of HIGICC.
Thank you.
And heading to a workshop in the 23rd at
23rd.
Alamana Park that
January.
people can need to, at the end of this segment, let's have you describe how people can
Register.
participate in that. After you
Okay.
get them excited
Yes.
by how we're going to react to the stuff that Burt produces in this dynamic, changing, challenging environment.
Yeah, so that is it's a huge need, and it's something all the counties and state, for example, are asking for, is technology to help manage all kinds of incoming information. And there's more and more of these sensors are coming aboard, like everybody's cell phone becomes a sensor in nowadays, and then there's all kinds of great other sensors out there. So yeah, how do you sift through all of that? And it also is very quick, and things happen, but then things are finished. Like, so you might have a road closure or tree down, like we talked about, but then it might later be cleared out. And so now you gotta not only
undo
say
that.
not only, yeah, exactly, you have to undo it. And then you also might want to keep some of the stuff for history, so you can have playbacks, and so you can do things like scenario testing, like, oh, next time we have another storm, you know, let's see what we did this time, but add in a couple of new things. So there's a whole complex layers of things that need to be done. And then as we were discussing, different people need to see different things. And generally in the business, we call those dashboards. And so everybody's going to have a different look and feel, but it's really all the same data. So what has to happen is you set the software up so it filters. So in some cases, you might not even see a map. You might just see charts and graphs. Some people just need to see bed counts in hospitals. Which hospital has beds? Which shelter takes dogs? You know, some simple questions where it's simple to map. Or other times it might be all populations, how many people live in this area that's being flooded, how many people need to be evacuated, and things like that.
Or the tax map.
Right.
which is sometimes pretty important.
Yeah, the property, who owns the property,
right.
what property is, and what value, because again, right after a hurricane or any storm that you're gonna apply to federal funding for relief, you need to very quickly get to the federal government account numbers of how much damage has been done, what kind of property damage has been done. And like the Big Island had that issue with the hurricane.
So then from a professional geographer's perspective, sitting in there managing vectors and scalars and all the things that are part of the digital world of map making as such, you guys are the ones who receive all this or have to deal with the challenges fed to you.
Yes.
You have to be able to understand what the commanders need to support their vision, and you have to be able to take information of things like what Burt provides and tie them together. So what kind of an operation do we have, or how do we stay ahead of that curve, so to speak, and continue to make things that can ingest the kind of information he's talking about, and then undo it when the issues have changed, and then put notifications out to tell people that what I told you 3 hours ago is no longer true, it's been changed. How do you think about all that?
Actually, my favorite example is we call it reverse 911, right? So they did that in California with the fires. Not only could people call in and say, oh, there's a fire, or have problems, the fire department now has the ability to call automatically using computers everybody in a certain area that they know needs to be evacuated. So they'll literally use a computer to call up people saying, you must evacuate, within an hour or something like that. And they're doing that in California. I'm not sure about here yet, but it's called reverse 911. So it's a great use of technology where spatially they know where the people are and they can call those people. The same thing we were thinking about, like with tsunami type. You might get a phone call or a text message as a tsunami warning because it knows you're in a tsunami zone because of the geography aspect of the technology. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways we can use this
Well, do we have
technology.
some place where that does come together, where Burt has a chance to express to you or the geography organizations in general what's coming in terms of the format of information and the types and what kind of illustrations might be necessary? How do you get that specification from Burt as to what to do with the data he produces?
Usually we would go through our agencies. It would be the EOC for the state or for the emergency management of the counties. Each county has its own center. This is, especially when you talk about natural disaster and emergency stuff, we always have to go through the official thing. But then, since he's already working with them, then they would be able to tell us what we need. It's not something, we all work together, obviously, but we always have to go through the agency directly just because it is so important and things have to be kept managed well and everybody has to be on the right page. But we knew, nowadays with all the technology, we're pretty much up on all the RSS feeds and the Atom feeds. And it's always hard to keep right on the bleeding edge, but we're always pretty close. And I'm sure he's using most of the standard
I think the interesting issue is that all of our historical past was developed before the world of social media, before the world of the broadly available information through the internet. Anybody in the world can be part of these things now.
Yep.
So expectations people have a habit of changing, consistent with what they do in their 24/7 lives. So they're going to expect to be able to put information in and get valid response back that's all saucered and blown and is corrected in ways that the expectations may actually exceed the realities of what can be done. And
Also, as an example, because of the immediacy that the internet offers, if there is no information that is being provided by the official agencies, people will start to look for that information in any place that they can, right? And what was happening a lot during the storm as it came into Puna, there's that sort of preparation period, and then there's the period of landfall. But then there's also this period that nobody really spends a lot of time on because it's probably the most difficult. It's just the period of recovery. And what happens is that without active sort of interaction between the community and perhaps the needs that they might have and the potential, let's say, supply or sources of resource that needs to be provided to that community, in lieu of anything being available, they created their own. And in the case of during ESAL, they actually created something on Facebook, which was a group that was primarily for that kind of recovery period, because what they wanted to do was let people know what some of the citizens in the Pune area were encountering, what they needed, and then others could go into the group and respond with perhaps providing some support or providing some service to them directly. And that Facebook group was sort of a good place to have that exchange.
So
go on.
everybody knew enough about Facebook, they were comfortable
Right,
with it, and
right,
therefore it
right,
was a
right,
media of
right,
exchange
right.
in that sense.
So in lieu of anything else being available, they will look at whatever tool they can leverage. And in this case, Facebook was a very easy one. It was pretty ubiquitous. Everybody was on there, so they could take advantage of it. And even Facebook has recognized that during an emergency, during a natural disaster, they will actually send out a notice to people in that area and ask them if they're okay. So if there was a major occurrence happening, let's say a big fire or a hurricane or a tornado or whatever, they would actually notify the people, because they know basically your address, right, and where you live. They will notify you and say, hey, are you okay? And then they would create kind of a registry so that people would know, if you're okay or not, right?
I did hear, just anecdotally, similar to what you were just talking about, when we were in the Philippines doing some work after Yolanda last year, that some organization in the Philippines used a bridal registry system as a way to note what needs were designed or desired by the population. I guess bridal registries, which I don't do, are really easy to do because you're selling something, and so it's not going to be a complicated form. And that's what was used to as the form of communication.
There's another tool that we started to really look at when ESAL was coming through, but we weren't at a position, because ESAL didn't create as much damage as we had sort of foreseen. But there's a site called Recovers, and Recovers is another one that we've been working with Civil Defense as well as Department of Emergency Management. And what it does is it provides local communities a way that they can post things that they need, and people can post things that they can provide. So it's a clearinghouse for that kind of service.
It's called recover.com or something like that?
.org.
.org, no kidding. What comes from my mind, you mentioned community involvement and community awareness and understanding, and the community has stepped up to the plate and has used whatever it can get its hands on in certain cases. And we have HARP, I never can remember how to pronounce it.
HARP.
And Margie's involved, myself as well in Waimanalo. And I'm wondering if some of these opportunities shouldn't be brought to their attention if they don't already know them. And maybe even do community exercises so that the reality of what these things really mean to a person like me who's not competent in the world of social media can become competent.
Well, to that point, there are communities that are taking it to the next level. One example is Manoa. Manoa had a event called Be Ready Manoa. Well, actually, it's not only an event, it's a community of people that are interested in being prepared for a disaster. And within that community itself, there are people that are ham radio certified, they're CERT certified, they're Skywarn certified, and there was a big fair that they did, and they showcased a lot of the capability. And I think taking it to the next level where they're actually perhaps participating in an exercise is the next step. Well, I was involved in the early part of 2014 on something called Makani Pahili.
Right.
And Makani Pahili is the annual hurricane exercise. And I was one of the embedded support people in the city and county. And then we had people across the entire spectrum from federal to state to all the counties. And in preparation for the actual exercise, which took place in June, the first week of June. And that was really to exercise the capability of all the first responders.
To taking it to the next level, as you suggest, how would we do that in, say, Waimanalo? What kind of vision would you have? And then we can ask Craig to, we'll ask General Wong to think of the vision along that line, and then ask Craig to think how he would bring the information display layer into the game, and then the social media part of it. How would we, just imagine for a moment that we could do this. What would it look like? What would you think it might look like, Darryll, if we put together a community level exercise, a level below Makani Pahili, just at the community level alone, where these things of people coming up with how we could actually make this work can be tested in a half a day or something like that?
Well, again, if you look at different communities have different resources. So Manoa may have more resources because of where it is versus Waimanalo versus Waianae versus Haula. So you take everything that they have and then you use it as best you can and you supplement it with what they don't need. So Haula, for example, created its own EOC. They knew they were going to go to high ground and what they needed was a helipad. So maybe you can now help them with a helipad because how are you going to resource them with food and things? And then even bringing in food, maybe not by roads, but over the ocean with some kind of LSV. Manoa would be a little different because you're not going to hit a beach. You're going to be going with 2 roads into Manoa, so you need to clear those roads. So again, taking everything that community has, you know, it's kind of like taking everything on the kitchen sink to make them resilient. Then what else do they need to make them even stronger? So think of it that way. Every community is going to be a little different, but basically the program of just letting them know what they have is taking, what do you call, the inventory of what they have and how they can strengthen themselves and what more can either the state or the city provide them to make them even stronger so that at some point the focus of DEM or state civil defense can be, we know these communities are strong, we're going to focus on this one that is maybe not as strong.
That's fantastic, and I'm just thinking, Margie's out there taking notes on this. We have a meeting next Wednesday night, I think, with HARP, and we'll be back. I'd like to bring this to their attention somehow, in a way that's non-threatening, because this, you know, this is, in fact, we had this discussion after the Manoa Be Ready Fair. Well, how do we take the next step here, exactly as you're saying?
Let me give you an example. So say in Manoa, you might not have people that have hop toads and all these other things. But maybe in Waimanalo, because people there are constantly doing construction and doing some. So you may have heavy equipment in that community that's already there because that's what the community normally does. Whereas in Manoa, the social media and computers and everything may be more used than in other communities. So everyone has its own strengths and weakness. Mm-hmm. So how do you clear roads in Manoa when you don't really have a backhoe that your neighbor normally has? Yeah. So that's why I'm saying you kind of take inventory of what you have.
That's great. And we have, in the case of Waimanalo, there are social events that occur. There's a Christmas parade, which draws the whole community together. There's the Makahiki, which is getting very strong. And there are various church and school groups, and there's a canoe club. So there are frames of reference that we could actually think about as a place to start an experimental exercise and see what we can do. I like that idea. Let's develop that more, and then maybe even talk about that in the context of the event on the 23rd that Craig's going to be leading when we come back from the break in 30 seconds.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Ted Ralston here, folks, Friday afternoon. Welcome to the last segment of our show, Where the Road Leads. And we're talking here about getting a vision of where that road is, and we can't contain ourselves during the break, so we continue pushing the conversation forward, this bunch, and I think we could put 15 or 20 more people who all have additional things to add to this table and have a great exercise. That's such an exciting idea, having an exercise. And we're going to have a mini exercise to a certain extent on the 23rd that Craig, who is the president of the HIGICC,
Very good.
Hawaii Geospatial Information
Hawaii Geographic Information Coordinating Council. Yes.
You might think of a simpler name some point along the way that
many of the other, every state has
rolls
one.
off the tongue.
Every other state has one, and I think we were last, and so like it sounds better, I guess, with North Carolina Coordinating Council, and then when it got to Hawaii.
Well, it's interesting. What's interesting to me is you guys are the center of all this because you're the ones where the expression takes place.
Yeah.
Whatever we do in the social media, whatever we do at the commander's critical information requirement, it ultimately needs to be expressed. And so what you've heard here and what you're planning on the 23rd, what can you say about that event? How can we invite people to participate, and how does it relate to the conversation we're having about an exercise?
Well, the event we're going to have is a little bit specific. So it is, if you're into mapping already and also the technology of GPS and stuff, it's going to be a little advanced because the HIGICC represents the geospatial professionals in the state. So you have to register, and there's a small cost because there's lunch, but so you are invited to come on down. And we were talking about the new technology of the UAVs.
Well, first of all, how do they get a hold of you, or how do people find out the agenda?
It's higicc.org.
So higicc.org, and that'll get you
to our website. It has right
close
there on
enough.
it, right on the first page. It says events and stuff. We have several events throughout the year. So yeah, and then so UAVs for this new kind of technology though, it's great because it is so small that people in neighborhoods have it. And so you could definitely have like a damage assessment even right after a storm, send it up, show the video, and that could be sent out to social media. Again, we have to filter with people like Burt here to make sure it's correct, but like that's the kind of stuff that people need to see right away. Because then again, the police and all that can be looking at that, and they can see where the flooding is or where people are trapped or whatever, real time. I mean, or basically just post-event, unlike never before, and especially before with the satellites or even airplanes, because most events have clouds, and so you couldn't see maybe for days what the ground looked like. Whereas a UAV, a little helicopter type deal with the camera, video, can go 200 feet over the tops of the houses. You'll see which power poles are down. You can see people. You can even start to, as they get better and bigger, you'll be dropping off supplies with UAVs, right? If you see somebody who needs an oxygen tank, for example, you'll be able to bring it right to their house and right to their door. Drop it off.
The UAV subject will reoccur on this show as it has in the past, like once a month, I guarantee you, or on his show once a month. And Bytemarks Cafe, by the way,
That's right.
is Thursdays.
No,
Wednesdays at 5 o'clock.
right.
Okay, on
Hawaii Public Radio.
Public Radio.
Well, this might get through the privacy issue where the community allows this during that time,
This is
because the
part of the
privacy issue is a huge issue.
This is part of the socialization
Right.
around that problem.
Right.
This is fantastic. I never thought about this, but you could even talk about, are you coming to the thing on the 23rd?
Oh, I just found out about it.
Okay, so you're coming to it, right? You go on the website,
HIGICC.org,
higicc.org,
right.
and tell them you know Craig and you're in. And,
Free lunch.
but,
No free lunch.
but why not make that a part of the discussion? I'll certainly bring it up in my part of the discussion.
Sure.
You know, how do we turn this into a mini exercise right there? And we can't fly them for various rules. We can hold them up in our hand, and the videos can be going, and that's the rest of it's just a bunch of skyhook stuff.
Right.
But that's a fascinating idea, is to have, everybody's got one. Every street's got
nowadays,
5 of them on it now.
yeah.
So you could flood the social media with all kinds of stills and videos. I mean, and videos. But I'll add the piece there that's interesting too. Sensor technology is moving along so fast. We're going to be picking up electronic spectrum sensor data, atmospheric pollutant type of data, infrared viewing, so you can see
People
damage
at night.
in people, or you can see damage in
Rescue.
crops through NDVI and things like that. So the dimensions of the analysis go way beyond just pictures. They go into a higher level of information, which, once again, the challenge then is how does the social media connector, the cyber connector, deal with all that, and how does the expression layer suck it all in and then convert it into something that commanders, who are generally not raised with all this and are still thinking of their mission they have to perform, how do we keep this all tied together, aimed at the mission, dealing with the commander's critical information requirement to serve the mission, and then we are all in the trenches coming up with those mechanisms of service. So,
And let me throw you a really interesting idea. You know,
Okay.
the fire ants are a problem, right?
Yeah.
I had asked,
Little fire ants.
I had asked people in DC, is there technology in satellites now that can find them? But it has to be a trail. Just think if somehow they could devise something that you could throw out and they would eat certain things, and then it could pick up with a UAV, and then you put it on GIS, and you can know where these ants are by it's kind of like isotopes or whatever that they'll eat, and then you can track them. So that's what technology can also help. And then the social media part, where you tell people that if you have them, then go get this and put it in your yard, and then maybe it's kind of like termites too, right?
Yeah, so one example, fire ants is one thing, but also, we're all familiar with coqui frogs.
Yeah, they did that.
Oh,
And-
that's,
They did
Yeah,
the
and
mapping.
coqui frogs,
They did
you
social
could
mapping.
crowdsource information about location of.
We've done it
of-
twice now.
Right, and so
Yeah.
if people are out there, they could take a picture, they could, record a sound, and it's geotagged,
Yep.
and then it comes into a central repository, then you can start mapping where some of the frequent occurrences of all these sightings are. And then whether it's the Department of Ag or Land and Natural Resources
The
or
OISC, the Oahu Invasive
yeah,
Species
invasive
Committee.
species,
They're
which
ones
is
who-
Land and Natural Resources, right?
They're kind of autonomous,
Yeah,
but
so,
they work
so
all
they can
together.
direct their attention to specific areas as opposed to running all over the place thinking, maybe it's here, maybe it's there.
Yeah.
So if you can crowdsource, and with the advent of sensors and the Internet of Things and more sensor data becoming more available, there's a whole community of programmers and developers that are interested in getting this data and creating visualization based on this data. So if you start to, and this is putting my open data hat on, if you start to make this data more open and accessible so that more people can create analysis or visualizations or some dashboards, then you got the community involved, right? The community wants to be involved. Because if you kind of limit it to just the professionals, then the community is going to still want to do something, but they're going to seek their own methods of doing it.
Now, we've had Kevin Montgomery on this show
Right.
once or twice. You know Kevin?
Yeah.
And you may not know him, but certainly General Wong does. And,
Oh, I know IntelliSense though. I know the technology. Yeah.
Okay, and it's attempting to go in that direction. Well, we got to take this thing down to a community experiment level.
we'll go back to the exemplary state
Yeah.
where
Mhm.
the kids and everything.
Mhm.
So like you say, it's science that matters to that community, and it could be taught in the schools,
Yep.
and maybe even the universities there that could do the things that you're talking about.
Right.
So I mean, they're getting a degree, but their degree in a master's program or PhD is trying to wipe out coqui frogs.
Yeah.
We have this, when cars became available and became widespread, we had to cook up a Department of Transportation in order to manage road traffic and road design and curb design and all the things that cars care about. And then we had to cook up a police department to try to manage the drivers and all that sort of thing. And then we cooked up training sessions in schools so kids can learn how to drive properly. So we had kind of an organized approach to how we managed physical traffic. We have this explosion of non-physical traffic, virtual cyber traffic, and in the social world, in the expressive world, in the command and control world, and yet we don't have a Department of Information.
Well, one of the things that is occurring is that there is more opportunity for community and citizen engagement. And if the people that are involved with, let's say, crisis management or disaster preparedness start to, let's say, have an event, whether it's a exercise event or maybe things like a crisis camp, where it can be an open discussion
Crisis
about
boot camp?
crisis, could be a crisis boot camp, could be these sort of unconference formatted events where people come in and they just want to do some brainstorming and come up with ideas. If you can have these kinds of events that are sponsored by the agencies and encourage citizen engagement to come in and brainstorm some ideas on how they could use data, how they could do visualization, how they could perhaps use social media, through these sort of environments for collaboration and brainstorming, you're gonna come up with the ideas and the innovations, and then you can start taking it to the next level.
So
But you gotta
that-
have the collaborative environment.
So we could take that down and inject it into people's 24/7 thinking by that kind of a hands-on experience. And my guess is a little bit would go a long way. You would suddenly see a whole new world as you experience this. I certainly would, and have been continually being amazed by what we don't know and how quickly we can use what we now learn. So turning this into an experiment with the three of us right here. I mean, the four of us, the three you guys, and have the frame of reference to think about that and help put it together. We've got Waimanalo, and we'll be glad to bring it up next Wednesday at our meeting in Waimanalo and the board meeting on Monday, and just see if there's a place we could attach this to some existing event or attach it to a community leader or something, and see if we can brainstorm our way through it. I like your idea. And just make it non-threatening.
Right.
Just, hey, spend half a day together, we'll everybody bring a bag lunch
Yeah.
and see what flows.
NOAA has a lot of resources. You should check out. I can hook you up with them.
NOAA?
NOAA. They do a lot with tsunami, inundation, and flooding, and all kinds of disasters. And they have a lot of training already, kind of, for communities, like brochures and pamphlets, and actually some software, so you can
But
look
I
at
think
it.
the thing that we're seeing here is, by virtue, as we said before, by virtue of the internet and social media, the rapidity of this information being available, the widespread aspect of it is just changing the frame of reference. So the order we might have all grown up in, J1, J2, J3, and J4, is being challenged to some extent by that. However, the thinking process is still J1, J2, J3, because it's got to be. And so we're at this
I think
But
yeah.
I think you brought up a good point. The military's understanding is it's a joint way to fight because of resources and everything. So now, as FEMA looks at it, it's no longer the federal government, it is the whole community
Right.
has
Yeah.
to do
Right.
this.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
this is what everyone's
Right.
talking
And I
about.
think the point that you bring up is correct. I mean, if you start to continue to sort of perpetuate the hierarchical thinking that might have been traditional, but now change that paradigm to start looking at more of a collaborative environment. And then that whole, I think, philosophy needs to start being imbibed by all the participants. Then you start to see more innovation and creativity come out of it. But you got to move away from the purely hierarchical kind of decision making.
That is a fantastic way to conclude our discussion for today. So Ted Ralston, your host on Where the Road Leads here. I'd like to thank so much our guests, General Wong, who's been on several times, Burt Lum, first time on this particular show, and Craig Clouet, first time, and I think we'll see you guys back. And you know the rule, after you've been here more than once or twice, you get to run the whole show.
Nice.
So that's a serious threat to the three of you. Thank you very much, folks, for paying attention to the last 45 minutes, and we'll see you again next Friday.